My sister invited all her old friends to my bridal shower, then handed me a gag gift, a cleaning apron. Because you'll be a maid, not a bride, she laughed. I stood up, took off the apron, and told everyone about her secret texts to my fiancé. The bridal shower should have been a day full of joy, excitement, and celebration, but when I walked into my childhood home that Saturday morning, the atmosphere felt all wrong. I had been looking forward to this day for weeks, though I'd been a bit apprehensive about my sister Hazel hosting it. She always went a little overboard with these things. But I'd kept my worries to myself, assuming she just wanted to help. I should have listened to that gut feeling. Hazel had invited a bunch of her old friends from high school, none of whom I knew well. I was surprised but figured she wanted to make the event bigger. Still, something about it felt off. When I entered the room, I immediately felt the distance between myself and everyone else. The voices around me felt too loud, too forced. It wasn't like the warm, welcoming gatherings I had envisioned. "Here she is," Hazel said brightly, trying to mask something in her voice I couldn't quite place. I forced a smile as she wrapped her arms around me, kissing my cheek. But the whole thing felt more like a performance than a reunion. After a few minutes of awkward chit-chat, I sat down on the couch, eyeing the sea of unfamiliar faces. My best friend Claire, who had been by my side through every planning stage, squeezed in next to me. She whispered in my ear, "This is odd, right?" I just nodded, feeling like an outsider in my own event. I tried to shake off the creeping anxiety. But then came the gift-giving. One by one, guests handed me wrapped presents, but I had a feeling this wasn't going to be like any bridal shower I'd ever imagined. Then it was Hazel's turn. She beamed as she presented her gift, a small, boxy package wrapped in shiny pink paper. The way she was looking at me, like she knew something I didn't, sent a chill down my spine. "Go on, open it," Hazel said, her voice just a little too enthusiastic. Everyone around me watched expectantly. I tore off the paper, revealing a bright pink apron. It was frilly and cheap-looking, the kind you might find in a novelty store. My stomach dropped as I noticed the words embroidered across the front in bold, garish letters, "Because you'll be a maid, not a bride." The room erupted in laughter. I felt my face burn with humiliation. I could hear a few people trying to laugh it off, but there was a coldness to it that made my blood run cold. Hazel, still grinning, was practically glowing. "I thought it was perfect for you," she said, as if she had just handed me the best gift ever. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, holding the apron in my hands. Everyone else was laughing, some even clutching their stomachs, enjoying the show. I was numb, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would Hazel do this to me? I felt a sharp sting of embarrassment, like my entire life had just been reduced to a joke. "Guess this is what being married is all about," Hazel said with a chuckle, glancing at the crowd for validation. "Taking care of your man, cleaning up after him." I wanted to say something, anything, to make the laughter stop, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt this sick, suffocating anger bubbling up inside me. Claire's hand gripped mine tightly, and she leaned in close. "Don't let her get to you. This is messed up, but don't let her win." I was fighting tears, but something snapped inside me. My anger surged, and suddenly, I wasn't just standing there silently anymore. I stood up, pushing the apron away from my neck. The room quieted as everyone turned their attention toward me. Hazel's face lit up with a look of mock surprise, as though she didn't know what I was about to do. "Actually, Hazel," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to fill the room, "I think there's something else you need to hear." For a brief second, the words felt like a weight in my chest, but the more I thought about it, the more I knew I had to say it. I didn't care about how uncomfortable it might make things or how messy it would get. Hazel had crossed a line, and now I was going to expose it. I pulled out my phone from my pocket, my hands trembling as I scrolled through my messages. There it was, the proof of everything. My heart raced as I looked at the text messages from Hazel to Nathan. The flirtatious comments, the insinuations, the manipulative words. It had been going on for months. Hazel, I said, my voice louder now. I know about the texts. The ones you've been sending Nathan. Her face went from smug to pale in an instant. She stammered, trying to form words, but it was too late. I know you've been texting him, telling him I'm not good enough, trying to convince him to leave me for you. My hand shook as I scrolled through the messages. Here. This one's my favorite. I know you're about to marry her, but we'd be so much better together. Just think about it. There was a collective gasp from the room, but my focus was entirely on my sister. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights. Her eyes darted from the phone to the faces around her, but there was nowhere to hide. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You were texting him behind my back, Hazel, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of hurt and fury. Flirting, trying to destroy my relationship. I didn't, Hazel finally spoke, her voice weak, but I cut her off. Stop. Just stop. I thought you were my sister, but you're not. You've been trying to wreck me for months. The room was dead silent now. I could hear the muffled sound of a car outside, the slight rustling of people shifting in their seats. Everyone was staring at us, and I knew I couldn't back down now. Hazel opened her mouth again, but I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned to Nathan, who had been standing in the doorway the whole time, his face ashen. He hadn't said a word since he walked in, and now he stood there like a ghost, unable to look me in the eye. I looked at him, my heart breaking all over again. So, Nathan, what's it going to be? You and my sister, or me? The words felt like knives in my chest, but I had to say them. Nathan didn't say anything. He just turned, walking out the door without a single word. It was like watching my world fall apart in slow motion. The guests awkwardly shuffled around, whispering to one another. Some tried to console me, but all I could feel was numb. Hazel didn't speak a word either, her face a mixture of shame and disbelief. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and followed Nathan out. It was over. The sound of the door clicking shut behind them echoed in my ears. I stood there, holding the apron in my hands, feeling both empty and strangely empowered. The humiliation was still there, but so was something else, a sense of clarity. I had just stood up for myself in the most public way possible, and I had never felt more certain that I was making the right choice. The aftermath of that day hit me like a wave. At first, everything felt like a blur, almost dreamlike. I had never imagined that something like this could happen to me, let alone at my own bridal shower. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my childhood home, surrounded by people who seemed just as stunned as I was. The awkward silence that followed was deafening. Claire stayed by my side, not saying much but offering me a comforting presence. I was grateful for her, but even she could sense how the mood had completely shifted. My mind kept replaying everything, the moment Hazel handed me that absurd gift, the laughter that felt like daggers, the cold shock of realizing that my sister wasn't the person I thought she was. I had never been more betrayed in my life. The next few days were a blur of emotions, anger, confusion, and, to be honest, a deep sadness that settled in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. How did I get here? Why would Hazel do that to me? What kind of sister acts like that? And more importantly, what was I supposed to do with Nathan? In the days that followed, I tried to put the pieces together. I wanted to know everything. How long had this been going on? What had she said to him? Had Nathan been leading her on all this time? But every time I thought about calling him, every time I tried to make sense of it, I felt a wave of nausea. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to hear him explain himself. What was there to explain? The messages were clear. He had made his choice, whether I liked it or not. But I couldn't avoid the inevitable. Nathan called me the following day, his voice shaky, his words stumbling. I need to talk to you, okay? I'm sorry for what happened, but we need to figure this out. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The audacity. I felt my chest tighten as I pressed my phone to my ear. No, Nathan, I said, my voice flat. You don't get to do that. You don't get to just show up after everything. I saw the messages. I know what's been going on. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him trying to find the right words, and I couldn't bring myself to let him off the hook. I wasn't going to listen to any more excuses. I never meant for this to happen, Nathan said finally. It's just. Hazel and I were talking, and stop, I interrupted, my anger rising. You were talking? That's how you're going to explain it. You were talking behind my back. You let her get in your head. She made you question everything about me and us, didn't she? I don't know what to say, he whispered. I've been confused. Confused? I echoed, incredulous. You were confused? Nathan, I don't even know who you are anymore. I don't know what was real between us. I never meant to hurt you, I swear, he pleaded. You already have, I replied, my voice tight with emotion. I don't want to hear any more apologies. I've already made my decision. We're done. There was another long silence, and I could feel the weight of everything settling on me. This was it. The end of my relationship with him. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. I wanted him to beg, to fight for me, but he didn't. He just let the silence stretch out between us, and that was all I needed to know. I'm sorry, but I think I'm done here, I said, hanging up the phone before he could say anything else. That evening, I stared at my phone for a long time, looking at Hazel's contact information. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out to her. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand an explanation. Another part of me felt so hurt and betrayed that I couldn't imagine ever speaking to her again. But I also knew something I hadn't fully accepted until that moment. I wasn't going to get closure from her. No amount of talking would fix what she had done. She had shown me who she really was, and that was something I couldn't erase. The days turned into weeks, and my life continued to spiral in a way I hadn't anticipated. Friends started reaching out, trying to offer comfort, but I wasn't sure I could accept it. Claire remained my rock, but even she couldn't ease the ache in my chest. Every time I saw someone else's wedding photos on social media, I felt a pang of regret. How had everything I had worked for gone up in smoke so quickly? Hazel's texts stopped coming. She never tried to contact me after that day. I blocked her number, knowing I couldn't trust her. It wasn't just about what she had done, it was everything. The lies, the betrayal, the sheer malice behind her actions. She had tried to destroy everything I had, and she didn't even care. I wasn't ready to forgive her. But there were moments when I found myself wishing for things to be different. I wished I could go back to the way it was, to the days when Hazel and I were close, when I felt safe and supported by her. But I couldn't undo what had been done. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something precious. For the first time in my life, I realized that family didn't always have your back. Sometimes, the people who were supposed to love you the most were the ones who hurt you the most. And there was no way to fix that. I threw myself into my work, trying to find some kind of normal in the chaos. I took a break from socializing, from dating, from anything that felt like it could distract me from the reality of my life. I needed time. Time to heal, time to process everything that had happened, and most importantly, time to figure out who I was without Nathan, without Hazel, without the life I had imagined for myself. I knew I wasn't the same person I had been just a few months ago. And maybe that was a good thing. Maybe I was finally learning what it meant to stand up for myself, to stop letting the people around me dictate my worth. But even as I worked through the pain, I couldn't shake the lingering question, what had happened to the person I used to be? The one who believed in love, in trust, in family? And more importantly, could I ever trust again? It was hard to say. But one thing was for sure, I would never let anyone do this to me again. Not Nathan, not Hazel, not anyone. The truth was, I didn't need them. Not anymore. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Hazel and Nathan were long and filled with moments of both clarity and confusion. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything, trying to make sense of what had happened. My world, once so certain and secure, had cracked open, revealing a new reality I wasn't sure I was ready to face. But as time passed, the hurt began to turn into something else, something I hadn't expected. I started to realize that while I had lost people I thought I could count on, I had gained something more valuable: myself. I no longer had to walk on eggshells, pretending that everything was fine. I didn't have to hide my emotions, my anger, my pain. I could finally be honest with myself about the kind of person I wanted to be, and that felt more freeing than I ever imagined. The betrayal still stung, but it no longer defined me. And as for Hazel and Nathan, they were fading into my past. They had taken up so much of my energy for months, but now they were just gone. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't waiting for a grand gesture. I was done. But that didn't mean I didn't want a little justice, something to tip the scales and restore balance in my life. One afternoon, as I was going through some old photos, I received an unexpected message. It was from Claire, my best friend. She had been keeping an eye on Hazel and Nathan since the fallout, knowing I wasn't in the mood to deal with them. Claire had always been a bit of a sleuth, and when it came to my family, she'd been tracking things quietly. "Hey," the message began, "I don't know if this is something you want to know, but I just got word about something interesting. Hazel's been spreading rumors about you. She's telling people that you're the one who's been controlling and manipulative, that you made her out to be the bad guy. It's honestly pathetic. She's still trying to paint herself as the victim." My heart dropped when I read her words. It was exactly what I feared. Hazel wasn't content with just betraying me, she wanted to rewrite the narrative, to turn herself into the wronged party in all of this. It was so typical of her. She had always known how to manipulate a situation to her advantage, and this was no different. But this time, she had picked the wrong target. I sat there for a few moments, fuming. I had been through enough. I wasn't going to let Hazel control the story. I wasn't going to let her turn everyone against me and paint me as the villain. I knew exactly what I needed to do. It took a few more days, but I finally gathered the courage to put my plan into motion. I knew I had to get ahead of Hazel's attempts to control the narrative. So, I contacted a few close friends and family members, people who knew both Hazel and me well, and invited them for a small gathering at my apartment. It wasn't about being dramatic or seeking attention, it was about reclaiming the truth. I started by talking openly about what had happened, explaining how Hazel had betrayed my trust, how she had crossed a line, and how Nathan had been complicit in it all. I didn't hold back, but I also didn't paint myself as a saint. I simply told them the facts, the painful truths. People needed to understand that this wasn't just some petty family squabble, it was a deep betrayal. The reactions were mixed, but the ones that mattered were the ones who understood. A few family members were shocked, while others, who had seen glimpses of Hazel's manipulative behavior in the past, nodded in agreement. It felt good to finally get it out there, to clear the air. But the true payoff came a week later, when Claire called me again. "Guess who came crawling back," she said, her voice laced with amusement. I braced myself. "Hazel?" "Yep. She's trying to apologize. She's been telling people she didn't mean it and that she was just frustrated with her own life. She even tried to say she was jealous of you and Nathan, which is why she acted out. But here's the kicker," Claire continued, "she's trying to use your breakup with Nathan to make herself look like the victim. She's telling everyone you're the one who drove him away." I was both furious and oddly satisfied. Hazel thought she could pull herself out of this mess by playing the victim? She thought she could rewrite the story and make me look like the bad guy? Not this time. "Can you send me the details of where she's spreading this stuff?" I asked, my voice calm but determined. "I think it's time I let everyone know the truth." Claire didn't even hesitate. "I've got it all. I'll forward you the info. Let's expose her for who she really is." It wasn't long before I found myself sitting in front of my laptop, preparing an email. It wasn't going to be some dramatic confrontation, it didn't need to be. I wasn't interested in yelling or trying to get Hazel to apologize. I just wanted the truth to be out there. I wanted people to know what she had done, and I wanted her to understand that she couldn't control the narrative anymore. I started by writing a calm, measured message, one that would explain everything without sounding like a rant. It wasn't about anger, it was about setting the record straight. Subject: clarification about recent events. To those who have been asking about the situation between myself, Hazel, and Nathan, I feel it's important to clarify a few things. While I respect everyone's desire to stay out of family drama, I also believe that it's important to be honest about what's been happening. Hazel and I have always been close, but in recent months, that relationship was put to the test. I learned that she had been secretly communicating with Nathan, sending him inappropriate messages and attempting to undermine my relationship. It became clear to me that Hazel was no longer the sister I thought I knew. As painful as it was, I chose to confront both Hazel and Nathan. What followed was a painful and difficult process of coming to terms with a betrayal I never saw coming. I have no ill will towards anyone, but I do feel it's important for people to understand what happened. I also want to be clear that while my relationship with Nathan ended, it was not because of my actions, it was because of his choices and involvement in Hazel's betrayal. I hope this clears up any confusion. I understand that there may be people who have heard a different version of events, but I felt it was time to share my side of the story. Thank you for your understanding. Sincerely, your name. I hit send, and with it, I felt a sense of release. I wasn't looking for sympathy, nor did I expect people to suddenly rally around me. But I had taken control of the situation in a way I never had before. Hazel no longer had the power to spin her lies without someone pointing out the truth. As the email started making its rounds, I could feel the weight lifting from my shoulders. People who had known Hazel and me for years were reaching out, expressing their support and telling me they had always suspected something was off with her. It wasn't vindication, it was justice. And it felt good. A few days later, I received a message from Hazel. It was short, simple, and to the point. I'm sorry for everything. I messed up. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a sense of finality wash over me. No, I thought. I didn't need to talk to her anymore. I didn't need closure from her. I had already closed that chapter of my life. I deleted the message and blocked her number. I had already told my side of the story, and I had nothing left to say to her. The satisfaction wasn't in watching Hazel squirm. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about reclaiming my power, my voice, and my future. I was no longer the victim of their betrayal. I was the one who walked away stronger.